I'd like to give a quick tutorial on the features and functions of NoWatt version 4. More precisely, I'd like to give an overview of the usage page, which you see when you sign on or if you go to the demo account. The usage page is comprised of four main sections: a toolbar, a panel bar, a grid and a chart. You can resize the channel bar, grid and chart using these resize bars or these collapse expand buttons. I'll collapse the panel bar, and as you can see, the grid and chart consume all the available space. This is always the way the usage page functions, so you get the maximum use of the smallest possible screen. The screen we're using here is an XGA screen, but you'll notice that if I move the toolbar up to the top of the browser window, the usage page consumes all of the browser window. Let's look at the toolbar. The toolbar first starts with a from and to select the period you wish to view data over. The application always ensures that from is before to and to is after from. You can use this to move both dates simultaneously. For example, if I push back to the 16th, you'll see that from moved to the 15th. We'll just load the data for the 15th. You should always wait until the waiting sign goes away before making another operation. And I'll do the from 16, and you'll see that 2 was pushed to 17. Just again wait for the data to finish. You can change the to and from either using these drop downs, by typing directly into the fields, or by placing your cursor directly on the field, the part of the date you want to actually change, and then using the up-down cursor key. So I'll push up and you'll see it moves to the 16th. So we're now back to where we started. The next item on the toolbar is the interval. The interval sets at what interval you wish to see the data for the selected period. So here we're showing 1 day, and the interval is every hour, and as you can see, we're seeing data every hour. You can change the interval manually, so or let the system decide how the interval is selected when you select the from and to. The idea of the interval is to make the data appropriately grouped. For example, if you're setting a large period of time, you probably wouldn't want to see the data every 5 minutes. Probably every day would be more sensible. And likewise, when you're looking at only maybe a few hours, you might want to see the data every minute. If you set the data every minute, by the way, we change these buttons, which I'm coming to always show watts. As you can see here, we're showing used, and I refer to what we show in the graph here, sorry. As you can see, this is showing kilowatt hours every 30 minutes. If we push the watt button, we'll see the actual amount of watts being used at every half-hour interval. And finally, push the cost button, we'll see what the actual cost is. This is currency now, and we'll see what the used was times the kilowatt hour rate we have stored for your account shows. The last button on the toolbar exports the data in this grid, and I'll explain the grid in more detail in a moment. Basically, the idea here is you can actually export the data as a comma-separated list and then use that data in other applications. Here I'm actually loading it into a... there we go. And then you might want to be able to manipulate it and change it as suits you best. Anyway, we'll come back to the grid and what you can put in that so you understand better what you can export. The next thing I'd like to look at is the panel bar here. The panel bar allows you to see 3 different things about the account. The first and most normal are the channels associated with the account. Here we've got a top level channel, a whole building, and we've broken it down by floors, and finally we've broken it down by the spurs on the boards on each floor. And I think in one particular spur we've taken a single appliance. You'll be able to actually see from this channel list here what channels we've selected to view. As you can see, in fact, they're all selected. But if we wanted to take off a particular set of channels, like I'm going to take off first floor, you'll notice in the grid updates and the first floor disappears, and the total for the building now is without the first floor, and consequently the grid is. We can select channels here. If I ground to look at, you'll see it selects it on the grid, and now we're seeing the ground floor. Another thing that the channels allow us to see are where there's data valid for the actual channel. Here you can actually see that we've got data loaded in for all of these channels apart from this appliance, and if they all were red, that would indicate either we were still loading data or the data was missing for the period that you've got selected. So I could just explain this appliance here actually is red because we're looking at data every 30 minutes, and we'd have to look at the data at a higher resolution for it to pick out the appliance. We'd have to put it probably at 1 minute. The next item on the channel bar, the meters. The meters are basically just a visualization of what your utility meter would show. So we can set this up to actually reflect what your utility meter is displayed, and it saves you going down to the basement or the cupboards to actually see what's on it. And it gives you a good estimated reading of what your utility bill will be for the things. Here, of course, these are electricity meters, so they're kilowatt hours. The last item on the panel bar are the gauges. This is really more eye candy. This is actually showing what the building's consuming at the moment. As you can see, it's consuming 7.3 kilowatts. That's about 30 amps. And what the power factor for the account is. Again, I say more eye candy than probably something you'll use every day. The channel bar is probably where you'll look most. That brings us to the grid. The grid shows all these channels, but it shows details about them. So for example, on this ground here I can see that currently it's using 123 watts. Over the day it's used 8.24 kilowatt hours, and that's cost 66 pence. And you can see that for every single channel. We can scroll through the pages of the channel and look at them. We can select them if we want to actually display a graph of how the actual consumption was distributed. And as I've mentioned before, you can actually export this data so you can do other things with it. One final thing you can do with the grid is you can drill down. As you can see at the moment, I've got it every 30 minutes, and that data is actually available in the grid. So if we open this third floor here, you'll see the data for every 30 minutes, what it was using on average, watts wise, how many kilowatt hours it used for that 30 minutes, and what that 30 minutes cost. And here's a very nice feature. You can actually click on one of these periods. So let's click on 1300, and the graph will show you what actually happened over that half-hour period. As you can see, this is now 1300 to 1330, so we can see any channel for any period within the interval we've actually selected. As you remember, when I actually showing the whole of the third floor, the period displayed here was for the whole period selected in Form 2. Lastly, let's talk about the chart here. The chart, as you can see, we've used a number of times already. It basically is a visualization of how either the kilowatt hours, watts or costs were distributed over the period you've selected in the toolbar. You can export this graph to other applications. Just right click on it and copy the image, and you can select what it shows either from the grid. So here, as you saw, I was selecting it from here, but I could select any particular channel. Notice also when I select a channel, by the way, it shows you where it is in the channels hierarchy here. So when I selected middle sockets, that's the middle sockets for third floor. Or of course I could actually select the channel in the channel bar. So I think that's about it for a basic overview of how to use the usage page. Thank you very much.